everyone, and welcome to today's roundtable in our CMO Peer Talk series. My name is Raakkel, and I work at PromoRepublic, leading the customer success and partnerships team. Today, we are going to talk all about the challenges and opportunities and what can be done with social media advertising. Specifically, when we're having this conversation, we're going to be talking about multi-location and franchise brands and some of the challenges and ebbs and flows of social that we have with us. So I know it's right on the dot of noon here in New York, but we're going to dive in right away. So just to reintroduce myself to those that are new to the series, as mentioned, I run our customer success and partnerships department at PromoRepublic. We are an all-in-one platform for local digital marketing for franchise brands. And I'm really excited to have our amazing panel with us today. I know the conversation will be really exciting. But before I introduce everyone, I do want to apologize in advance. I do have a bit of a sinus infection, so if I have to mute very quickly, that is why. So hopefully we'll make it through this painless, and I have water and tissues right away, but it will be as good as normal, I'm hoping. So our first guest speaker here today is Natalie Miller from Curious Jane. Hi, Natalie, how are you today?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to meet with you all today. Like Raakkel said, my name is Natalie Miller. I work at Curious Jane, which is an ad agency specifically that works with franchise businesses and other multi-location businesses across the United States and Canada. So my role, I have been in the weeds with social media advertising for many, many years with clients like FedEx Ground, Kumon, Anytime Fitness, Drybar, Plato's Closet, amongst some others. So I have faced a lot of the challenges you all are experiencing with social media advertising and have hopefully found some pretty good solutions. So I'm excited to work with you all today and to have this great conversation. So thank you for having me.
Of course, thank you for sharing. I'm excited to hear your perspective. So then our next speaker for today is Madeleine Park. How are you, Madeleine? And welcome back. I know you've been with us before.
I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for having me. So my name's Madeleine. I am a kind of a unicorn in the space. I worked on the franchise brand side with Threshold Brands for about a decade in their marketing department. I'm also a multi-unit, multi-brand franchise owner. I've got about 15 locations in the Philadelphia area. And I'm also the director of marketing at a franchise ad agency called Netsertive. So we help franchise brands with everything digital marketing. So I'm getting the full scale. I see the pain points across everything and have definitely used a lot of money to test things. So hopefully you'll pick up some tips that way so you won't be wasting any of your dollars. And shout out to Josie Duvall. I see you on here. Appreciate the support.
We love having you because the fact that you are a unicorn, not only do you have like the agency background, but you are a multi-unit owner. So you know what franchisees are dealing with on the day-to-day basis and what they're looking for in terms of advertising in this case. So I'm really excited to hear your perspective today.
Sure, thanks.
And last but not least, we have Tori Johnston with us today. How are you today?
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Tori Johnston. I am the Chief Marketing Officer of AKT, and AKT is part of the Exponential Fitness family. So I represent the franchisor side of things today for this discussion. And AKT is a dance-based cardio studio. We offer a unique combination of 4 different fitness modalities: dance, bands, circuit, and tone. We have about 30 locations in the US and about 150 franchises sold. So we are growing really quickly and opening new studios across the market, all different markets in the US. And I'm excited to talk to you a little bit more today.
Yeah, thank you. And the fact that you have the franchisor side is really important for the whole conversation as well, because I think today's panel is really exciting. We not only have the agency perspective and the franchisee perspective, but the franchisor perspective. So we're really hearing it from all sides and putting all of the puzzle pieces together today. So thank you all for taking time out for the panel today. Let's just dive in with our first topic today about social media advertising and the specific platforms that you're utilizing, because we know social media advertising specifically has been a trending topic, not only for quite some time, but has exponentially escalated since the beginning of 2020 because more resources were poured into digital during that time. And we can see that 2 hours per day is the average increase per user since the beginning of 2020 as well, because we were, as we know, all in the same situation at home for quite a big part of that, or just consuming new digital platforms. That's really when the TikTok platform really took off. So it's really interesting to see that advertising across all platforms has escalated as well. And we've seen this in a global annual marketing report that Nielsen published that highlights that 65% of marketers say that social media is their most effective channel. So more and more brands are finding success through this, like TikTok. I know I've seen so many more ads on there than I first started, as well as Instagram, as we know, and Facebook, as we come to love. So the first question that I'd like to give to the panel, and maybe Tori, you can start off here going with that franchisor perspective, is what does your strategy look like in terms of social media advertising? Are you on maybe just 1 to 2 platforms or advertising, or do you maximize your presence across the web?
Absolutely. So, I mean, the answer of where do we use all of our focus and our energy is definitely always changing. But for this year, we've really put a lot of our social media advertising dollars into Google, Facebook, and Instagram. Until TikTok really offers zip code targeting, we have to really hold off. I'm dying to get onto TikTok, especially for AKT as a dance-based cardio brand, just with the nature of dance and movement within the platform. But from a franchisor perspective, we really need that zip code targeting available so that we make sure that we are really hyper focused on users or leads that could potentially come through from a specific area and demographics. So I'm waiting on that patiently to come out. But in the meantime, we're trying to grow our TikTok channels just organically and encouraging some of our local studio partners to start their own channels as well, just to become more familiar with the platform. In terms of paid dollars, as we open new studios, we're really spending a lot of our time and energy on Facebook and Instagram to gain brand awareness. And then once our physical location actually opens, we really start to implement our Google campaigns as well to layer on top of that. As we have more qualified users, as we have more and more people becoming familiar with the brand, searching for the brand, we find that our highest conversions really come from our Google campaigns. So right now it's just Facebook, Instagram, and Google, but TikTok will be soon enough.
Yeah, and TikTok dancing movement and AK like really fits hand in hand. So I can only imagine the chomping at the bit there. But it's really interesting that Facebook and Instagram is secondary to Google, especially because it's such a visual franchise that you're a part of. Natalie, what is the strategy that you try to employ within the franchisors or franchisees that you work with at Curious Jane?
Absolutely. I want to first piggyback right off the comment that Tori said earlier about TikTok and zip code targeting. That is definitely a conversation we have so often with a lot of our local brands who have that perfect audience for TikTok. What capabilities do we have to reach them? And I think for me to answer your question, Raakkel, like that is the perfect intro, because the question I can't answer that until we ask the question of the brands we're working with of who's your customer and where does your customer live? Because that is how we can help to create the perfect media strategy. If you do have like a Gen Z, maybe a teen or a young 20s or even now 30s, type audience, TikTok absolutely can be an option. But obviously, as a local business, so I'm in Lakeland, Florida. So if I had a local business here in Lakeland, Florida, I would be a part of the Tampa DMA. So do you want to advertise your Lakeland, Florida business to the entire Tampa DMA? It's not the best use of marketing dollars when you're running into those types of obstacles. So find where your customer is and then find the tools that you can use to help reach them. So TikTok is great for that Gen Z, but also so is Instagram, so is Snapchat. That does have more targeting type capabilities with, Tori, to your point, zip code targeting. With Meta, Facebook, and Instagram, you can drop that pin and do a radius around a location. So it's all about understanding where your audience is and then what tools you have in your toolbox to best reach where they are digitally online. So I think that's kind of how I would answer that question. I know that's kind of a not quite a verbatim answer, but hopefully that helps.
Absolutely. It definitely helps. I think that's the first step that anyone really needs to take when they're sitting down to think about what they're going to do with advertising is who is our audience and what are we speaking to and what's the message. So I definitely agree with that. And both of you have raised like that ever important point. When you're working with a multi-location brand, you need to focus on, how specific you can get with the territory of your franchisees, because I think that's a unique problem our industry has that, a single unit or a different company wouldn't necessarily face. So that's a really, really great perspective. Madeleine, I know you have that combination unicorn perspective, so I'm eager to hear what you think of and when you're putting together a digital advertising strategy.
Yeah, so I think the three parts here is the agency. We want to see you get great results because we don't make money unless you make money. On the franchisee side, I don't want to put money into anything that's not transactional. While I should have to do that, I'm still always going to be like, I don't want to use Facebook marketing because I'm not seeing clients come directly from that. And on the franchisor side, it's both. You need to promote that brand awareness, but also take into account the amount of spend and the transactional nature. So my answer to this is kind of twofold, where with any of your marketing spends, you have to hold them accountable. But accountable to what? So for a franchisee thought process, a lot of it is, or I should say 99% of it is transactional. That comes from kind of the older generations of marketing where you could spend $200 on a direct mail drop and get 20 clients, and you could calculate it that way. Unfortunately, that's just not how it is in the digital age anymore. Clients need about 7 times seeing you before they're going to say yes. So while the brand awareness channels might not seem effective, they're getting you to that yes. We have seen growth in the Facebook and Instagram where about 5-10 years ago, nothing was being sold. And then it was, small products from overseas. And then people started experimenting with maybe clothing, realizing, oh, I can order something from Facebook and it can show up and not be terrible quality. So now we're moving into higher price items such as appliances. People are starting to resell. And so then I think, in the next 5-10 years, we're going to see higher priced items such as products, higher, appliances, cars, real estate, businesses for those on the Fran Dev side. So until we reach that transactional spike, you have to be where people are. And Facebook and Instagram is where people are. So you need to put money into those platforms so that you're getting the reach. However, understanding that those are not the transactional places that you're going to be. That's where Google comes into play. People are buying from Google, to Tori's point. And then for people saying, what about Pinterest and TikTok and Snapchat? Well, that really depends on the cost and to Natalie's point, the DMA of your customer. For the most part, I say if you are going to advertise on those should be your extra marketing dollars for an extra layer. Put yourself in the consumer shoes where I never am on Pinterest to buy something. I'm on there for inspiration. If I see a brand, that's great. But very rarely am I going to click that and go off the platform to buy something. Same thing with Snapchat, same thing with TikTok. So it really is a brand awareness thing to really hyper target into the age range of your customers. Pinterest would be great for me. I have a home cleaning franchise. So, that's where the moms are. But again, people are not on there to buy. So really your ad dollars are better spent on Facebook and Instagram. They've got a high power in the SEO world and with Google. And then again, keeping in mind that it doesn't have to be transactional to work.
One more thing to build off what Madeleine was saying, in the service-based industry, like home cleaning or my situation with fitness, we really are just trying to offer something to those users in our digital ads that's a trial. We're trying to get them to take, a little bite of what we're showing them to come into our system as a lead. And so rather than transacting and buying, a blouse or a tank top or a new skincare item like you would see on a lot of direct to consumer brands, we're offering our services as a way to come try it out. And that trial is what's going to bring them into our brick and mortar studios or into our, our lead funnels. And so to me, the most important thing is getting somebody to bite on that trial. And then we have to really make sure that our marketing approach services that lead the entire way through their funnel. So we're throwing it all out there, hoping that people like the cover page of our book. And then once they open the book, we're going to show them the rest of the brand.
I think this begs this is a fantastic conversation because I love the perspective of the transactional piece and how do we get in front of the person buying when they want to buy. And that always comes back to the research phase and that marketing funnel, Tori, to your point. We need to fully understand the customer's journey of how they buy. So Madeleine, you had made a great point earlier that it takes, on average 7 touch points for somebody to make a transaction. So our responsibility as marketers is to understand what those touch points look like and how do we use these different tools that we have at our disposal to create the perfect pipeline for that marketing journey to happen. So while, people may not be going on to Pinterest to make a purchase, they're going on there to research and to be inspired and to find new ideas. So does that type of persona, maybe, I don't know, I love Pinterest myself. So maybe somebody in my age range looking for home decor inspiration. If I see, a home service cleaning franchise ad on there, then maybe I start to think about that. And I see it again on Meta, which may be a little bit more of a transactional type platform, asking for, hey, we're happy to give you a free quote, or maybe more of a transactional message. It's all about aiding that customer through their research journey and their buyer's journey to give them the nuggets of information they need along that journey. So I think I would argue that all of those different platforms can have transactional intent. It's just about hitting that person at the right time in their transactional journey and giving them the information they need to answer their questions before they even have them. So I think this is certainly a hard question when you're trying to figure out which platform for your brand. You don't know until you have that data. So you guys were talking earlier about testing. So get on there and test, see where your audience lives, where they bite onto that free trial for your fitness, your fitness product, to your point, and use that data to really, really mold that media plan for your business.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with everything that was said. And I do echo your sentiment, Natalie, about Pinterest. I know we've attended Shop Talk conferences in the past all about e-commerce. And Pinterest was, highlighting their effectiveness of ads because you do have that click through naturally there. You have a CTA that you can put in. So I think it's about finding, as you said, the right platform for your business, because no business is going to have that same magic recipe as the next business, because your demographics are going to be different. What you're offering, whether it's a dance studio or, a home cleaning service, that's all going to be different and affect the end result at the end of the day. So everything that was highlighted today, that the fact that you want to be as precise with your targeting as possible, the fact that you want to test and research and match your demographic where they are, I think those are all really important points when putting together your strategy and choosing what that platform looks like. So while we're on the topic of just kind of the intro, if you will, of social media advertising, I would love to know how you are choosing to distribute your budgets across any platforms that you're working with, and if your ad spend has changed over the past few years. Maybe Natalie, we could start off with you there, since you do this for multiple clients.
Absolutely. And I think, I don't mean to keep beating the topic, but I think that testing is such a great exploratory process if you have a little bit of time and data to really, really understand where those ad dollars should go. So we've talked about, making sure you know where your customer lives, but it's about trying and testing different types of campaigns, using different types of creative elements and assets to really, really send that message. And when we think of our, as marketers, our rule book is that marketing funnel. So really understanding awareness, what an awareness message looks like for your brand, it's and how that aligns with that that customer's research process. So it's putting your ad dollars in those different phases strategically to understand, okay, if this isn't an awareness ad that maybe has 25% of my budget or 15% of my budget, I want to make sure those ad dollars go in platforms where, okay, people are looking for inspiration or ideas. So maybe Pinterest, maybe TikTok. And of course it's different for each brand, but think of where they start that research journey. And then later where they go to be a little bit more transactional, Madeleine, to your point earlier. So it's spoon feeding and placing your budget in those different locations, testing messages, testing creative assets to find the right way to put those puzzle pieces together for your media plan. I think to give you a less abstract answer, you had a great question, where are we putting money? Holistically, when we look at some of the franchise businesses that we work with from both the local and the corporate level, we always fall onto Meta or Facebook, Instagram as kind of our baseline. We love Meta just because it really has that audience. It's got, I think I recently saw it was at over 2 billion active monthly users. Odds are, we all know, it's hard to find somebody who doesn't have a Facebook page or an Instagram page. So if we really want to find users, we start with Meta. Understand how they move about the platform, what interests them, what types of content they're clicking on to really start gathering that data that can influence how you want to put them on other platforms. So are they interacting with maybe more business type content that your brand? Maybe that might be a better avenue for LinkedIn. Or do they like quick short-term videos that you are putting on there? Maybe a Snapchat or a TikTok. So start with Meta. That is a great home base. And obviously that machine learning with Meta is just powerful, gives you a lot of great data and a lot of great things you can use to hone in on your perfect target.
Absolutely. Really well said. And I do think that research phase is going to be something that everyone will have to navigate in the beginning, because that's how you learn and figure out what is that right recipe for you. But Meta does have not only the enhanced targeting that you can do, but the value of having 2 billion plus active users, not just total users. These are people actively using it on a daily basis. And that's who you want to target, because that means they're on their phone or on their computer regularly using it. And that means more opportunities for you and your advertisement to be seen. So that's a really great point. Tori, over to you. I would love to know how you're distributing your budgets across the social platforms that you're active on, and if your ad spend has changed over the past few years.
Yeah, like Natalie said, Meta is definitely our baseline. That's where we go first. When somebody launches a local digital advertising campaign, they're going to start on Meta. It's always been that way. That hasn't changed over the past few years, but what we have seen is a little bit more seasonality to our business and effects on the life cycle of a business. So we're in the process right now of opening a bunch of new fitness studios. And as a studio is getting ready to open, there's not a brick and mortar location yet. We haven't had those grassroots activities. We're not doing direct mail quite yet. Our signage isn't up and it looks like a construction site. So for us, the only place where we can really start to meet consumers is on Facebook and Instagram. So we've been using that day one of signing a lease all the way through the life cycle of a studio. But like I mentioned before, we start to add in these other types of campaigns as we learn more, as we spend more, as we test out and learn from those results, what we're really looking to achieve. And so in a brand new studio location that is under construction, opening in a new place like Tampa, we really start with Meta as that baseline. We quickly add in additional dollars for Google, but not until the studio is actually open. So for us, it's really about the life cycle rather than just the month-to-month budget, but tracking that return on investment over time after a location's physically open and able to service our clients is really the long-term result that we're looking for.
That's a really good point. And I think that's something that we should all keep in mind, especially because at the franchisor level, you're thinking of how can I help my franchisee from, when they sign on, as well as launching and the day-to-day. So by putting that ad spend into the Meta platforms to really build up the hype, so to speak, around the studio, and then getting the consumers consistently in and the leads coming is a really important perspective that I don't think should be missed. So thank you for sharing that. And Madeleine, back to you, I know, for that hybrid approach. But how do you decide what you're distributing your budgets for? Let's take, for example, your home cleaning franchise. franchises that you have? And what about your ad spend, if anything, changed over the past few years?
Yeah, so ad spend changes not only over the last few years, it has to evolve to where people are going, and obviously with inflation, but also seasonality. So I own home cleaning. I also own mosquito and tick, which is super seasonal, and also exterior house cleaning services, which are also in between the seasonal hard stop and full service there. So I think that this begs the question or point of, before you're putting money into your ad spend, you need to make sure that the content you're spending money on is going to work. So I usually tell franchisees that they need to have one of the 3 E's, which is either entertaining, education, or be some sort of exclusive, giving people an intent to interact with your content. If you're going to post something that's not one of the 3, probably not going to do well, even if you spend a lot of money on it. So ensuring that the creative and content you have is not overlooked before you put money into it. Secondary is, again, you have to be where people are. So the metaphor I always like to use is, if you put a toy in a toy store and don't tell any kids or anyone about it, what are the chances they're going to buy it? Probably pretty low. If you do that and you decide to put banners up right in the front and you're pinging their phones and you're on Facebook, your intent to buy goes very high. So again, being where people are with their intent to purchase, to Natalie's point there. Again, I mean, Meta is the baseline. They've got all of the targeting, they've got all of the information, they connect very highly with Google. For us, we spend the majority on Google. That is where we're seeing the ROI, we're seeing the traffic. It's also driving people directly to our site, which tends to convert better and have, better quality client, if you will. Then comes Facebook and Instagram. I would make a very bold statement to say that I do not recommend LinkedIn advertising to anyone at this point, whether it's Fran Dev, consumer, unless you are in maybe the employment side of things, sure. But I think everyone on this call can agree that they have been spammed with direct in mails or whatever. And I have spent probably over $10,000 on all sorts of different LinkedIn advertising for all sorts of different companies and brands and leads. And it's just never worked. So I just don't think it's there yet. So that's kind of my bold statement there. But again, to the point of the Toy Story metaphor, if you can't afford these big campaigns, start with $1 a day. That's the minimum to spend there. And it's at least reaching people outside of your direct network, the people that already know about you, they follow your page. So you have to constantly be reaching new people. So you don't have to have these million, trillion, thousand, whatever dollar budgets to do it. You need to start, and to back what Natalie said, you got to test and you got to get numbers. From there, you can kind of start to mold how much your budget should be. And also, don't be afraid to network or talk with other agencies or other local businesses, other franchises, whatever you're in, and get an idea of their spend. I think right now for QSR, so quick service restaurant, it's recommended local digital marketing spend across Google and Facebook/Instagram is about $1,200 to $1,500 a month to really make a dent. So making a dent meaning you're acquiring new customers and you're seeing the longevity there. Again, for brand awareness, a little bit harder to track, but don't be afraid to talk to the professionals. It's going to be different in everyone's time of the year, everyone's location, zip code, everyone's industry, everyone's unique office. And also you're going to have to split that depending on what type of business you are, splitting your budget between franchise development, meaning finding new offices or finding new clients and finding employees. So, there have to be a budget split across, and the creative needs to align with each one of those. So to your answer, it's different for everyone. Ask your friends and experts, and it will continue to evolve, not only yearly, but seasonally and monthly almost, if you will.
Absolutely. I'm curious to ping it back over to Natalie, because you are on the agency side of things and you service so many different clients. Yes. What is your opinion on LinkedIn advertising?
Oh, girl, you hit my heart when you said that. It is a bold statement, of course, but I mean, I very respectfully, humbly disagree. And for the reason of, so LinkedIn, I mean, personally, advertising for, we use it a lot for franchise development for a lot of our clients. And to be honest with you, it has emerged as the platform that has allowed for us to have the highest quality of leads that we have seen within the franchise development space. And absolutely, we can agree that I think the LinkedIn cost that we see is totally different than what we see across costs for Meta or, for some of those other platforms. But I think when you have the very, very transparent feedback with, sales teams working with those marketing teams and truly understand, hey, how are the leads coming in for this brand? Are they the quality? How long is it taking for you to close them? We have seen a lot of success on LinkedIn for franchise development, but it's all about that persona again, right? So if your persona for your brand is not on LinkedIn, then don't spend your money there, of course. But I do really appreciate some of the targeting options that we have with LinkedIn. For example, if you know that your key new franchise owner has a very tried and true history in IT, that is something that we are able to target immediately within LinkedIn. And I love the capability of that. So without getting too much on a tangent, I think I'm going to roll that back down to just test, find where your audience is and test it. But one thing I just really quickly wanted to bring up as a part of this discussion, when it comes to establishing marketing budgets for your local business locations, I always want to kind of cycle that back to corporate spend. So working in the franchise space, some, corporate entities work with their franchisees to have a national ad fund or are spending money on marketing from the corporate team and then expecting franchisees to be, doing marketing locally. So what does that balance look like within your franchise structure? What is corporate responsible for doing at the corporate level from the brand awareness to really, really emphasize your company as a whole? And then what efforts are you making from the local piece? So emphasizing your business within your local community. I would caution, of course, have those conversations, ask and communicate with your corporate team, just making sure that the ad dollars that you are spending from the local level are not directly competing with efforts happening at the corporate level. And there's so many different tactics and questions and structures that can be put in place to truly make sure that marketing efforts from the corporate side and the local side are working seamlessly together instead of a kind of a versus or a competing marketing structure. So I think that's an important conversation to be had that could take forever, but I will spare you all those details.
Natalie, I'm curious on your Fran Dev thing for LinkedIn. Are you using in-platform leads, or are you sending people to a landing page?
A little bit of everything, truthfully. So we have seen great results with in-platform leads. You are seeing typically that lower cost per lead, but then of course there's always that question of quantity over quality. So it's about finding how that user is researching and getting their information. So we may have maybe a download or something available that is maybe a little less committal. Maybe we don't need a whole lot of research. That may be an in-platform lead opportunity, and then remarketing. Perhaps taking them off of the platform onto the website to have a little bit more research, spend time on the site, and then track and remarket with maybe Google Display, maybe Meta. And so they're getting those multiple touch points into something a little bit more committal towards the end of that marketing journey.
Sure. And then in your tracking, you're attributing the lead where they came from with your tagging to LinkedIn.
So a little bit of, yes. So we are able to see with LinkedIn, you can do your attribution at it as each campaign or last campaign, but then with UTM codes going from place to place, you can pull all of that within your Google Analytics to really see that whole picture. So you are able to see how people are clicking and coming to that site. And if you are linked with like a marketing automation software, for example, like a HubSpot, you'll be able to see how that data is coming in as they're downloading that lead gen form, or I'm sorry, they're converting on that lead gen form, maybe downloading an asset, coming in, converting later on your website, et cetera.
And what's your typical budget for LinkedIn? Because I'm just curious to hear. When I was on brand side with Threshold, we actually were in talks with you guys for a while. So we went with somebody else, but again, even on the agency side, weren't seeing the success that you're kind of speaking to. So I'm just curious what that budget looked like to be getting a constant flow of leads that you can attribute back to LinkedIn.
Sure. And that is a fantastic question because it is a little bit more of an expensive platform. One brand that is coming to mind with us is spending a bit, looking at budgets of maybe $20,000 a month.
Okay.
We do have other brands that have a lower cost, but is a little bit more national. So it's like they're targeting multiple DMAs in one pool as opposed to a very like micro type approach. We've got ad spends. I think some campaigns are doing about $5,000 a month, which we're still seeing cost per leads probably between 100 and I would say 215, which for franchise development with the the franchise review report that was released in October at the Franchise Development Leadership Conference, they had said last year that the national cost per lead was $197. So that puts you right in ballpark for the franchise development type of cost that you might expect for those leads.
Awesome. No, that's great to know. Yeah, I think when I was doing it, our budgets were around the 5 to 7, but I think it was over like a 3-month period for like a year. So I think that just makes definitely more sense as to the conversion factors there. But then pulling it back to, we were using brokers at the time, which is, 25,000 minimum off the bat. So I think for brand dev, we tended to, instead of cost per lead or cost per click, we would go cost per acquisition. So anything under 25,000 at that point was a win, but that's great to know. I'm excited to know that LinkedIn isn't a total failure for Fran Dev, because that really is where all of the great people are. So thank you for that insight.
No, and I'm so glad that you even mentioned it and opened up that conversation. And I think to your point earlier, it really does all go back to testing, right? Maybe it didn't work for a pest control brand or a home cleaning brand, knowing that that's a little bit, that's in your industry, but working with other types of brands. I mean,
sure.
It's just all up to testing, of course.
Raakkel, this is why you had a whole vast 3 of us here. So look at that.
That's what it's all about. I mean, I couldn't make this up. But this is the type of conversation that we're actually bringing you all here to have, and to really be open, honest about your struggles, what works for you, what doesn't, what you have seen on the agency side, the franchisor side, and the Zor and agency side for you, Madeleine. So definitely welcome the commentary. But so I think the takeaway from part 1, at least for me, is that you have to start small and start testing to really understand what you're doing. And then when you have the data to back it up, you can really move on and invest into platforms that work for you, whether it is LinkedIn, as controversial as it is, or whether it is the Meta platforms, or even Pinterest with its e-commerce strategy. So thank you all for that lively debate. But I want to move to localizing, because we did touch upon this a little bit. And I know, Tori, you mentioned this about the franchisor side having a national campaign versus the franchisees, they want something hyper local. And we do see the trends nowadays, and including Google, they're making the focus hyper local, and consumers are preferring to engage with a brand on its local pages over a national account, because the benefit of that is that they feel that they're speaking with their neighborhood shop, and franchisees at the end of the day are a pillar of the local community. So multi-location brands are really using this to its advantage, whether it is the hyper localization of social content or ads in itself. So the first question really on this topic of localization to yield sales or to yield conversions, as you're looking for, are what main challenges, I know it's going to be a tough conversation, but what are the main challenges that you face as a franchisor compared to those that a single brand or a single unit business doesn't face? Maybe Tori, we can start with you on that one.
Yeah, back to what Natalie was saying, there are those corporate dollars that you're spending. Most of the time in my world, it's trying to drive brand awareness. And then there are those local campaigns that you're asking a franchisee to put up a few $1,000s per month on their monthly marketing spend to commit to digital advertising on top of all the other things they're doing to run their local business. And so it is a huge commitment. And the benefit of being part of a franchise is that we've done this many times before. There's a business within a box. There's been multiple things tested. There's been dollars spent in other markets or similar markets to yours, or we can take those learnings and really apply them to your local market. The fact of the matter is it costs more to do business in certain markets, at least for fitness. We know that there's certain DMAs that are more expensive to advertise in. You might save in other parts of the business, or maybe you can, charge a higher ticket price for a membership, but the cost for advertising might just be that much more upfront. Sometimes that's covered by a corporate cost. Other times we're just asking a franchisee to commit to a larger budget upfront. But when it comes to the actual content and the localization of that, we're really taking what we have from a corporate bank of images, of videos, of boomerangs, of copy, and things we know have worked in the past. And then we're really starting to test that in your local market. We know it works best if we look at all the KPIs across the brand, but when we come down to a specific local market like Tampa or Denver or Seattle, we quickly act to test and then refine really quickly within that 30-day cycle. So for us, it's putting our best creative assets forward based on what we know of all the other franchise locations, and then implementing some of the local content as well. Back to the brand marketer in me, it's really people want to be seen in your photos, in your videos, and your advertisements. They want to see themselves as potentially being a member at your fitness studio or being a customer of your brand. And so that looks a little bit different across the country. And we've noticed that as we've opened new studios in other places besides just New York and LA. What does a fitness client look like in Ohio? What does a fitness client look like in Kansas City? And most of the time what we find is that people that come to fitness studios are inactive. They're looking for the next step in their fitness journey. And so rather than having somebody with six-pack abs and being totally ripped in every photo and sweaty and looking like they work out 7 days a week, we're trying to portray the idea that somebody could be less active and then they're looking to take that next step, and that everyone is welcome at AKT, all different shapes and sizes, all different walks of life. And so those are some of the learnings that we've tested locally that have really made a big impact, that would have been different than just launching the same national creative across all local accounts.
I think that's a really great example, because authenticity is something that maybe you don't think of when you think of social media in general, but the trend is to be more your authentic self and less that polished, like filtered persona that we've come to, think of synonymously with Instagram, for example. So by putting a authentic view of what a person looking to join a club across the country is, I think that's a really important highlight about it, ways to localize. It's not only in, let's say, the copy or the advertisement and call to action, it's also in the physical creative that you put in, which ties back to Madeleine's point on, you need to have a creative that works and you need to invest into that. So that's really great feedback. I'm curious, Madeleine, what's your perspective on, some challenges that as franchisees and franchisors we face when compared to an average business when thinking about advertising here?
Yeah, I mean, the good thing about franchise advertising and multi-location, if you're not in a franchise, is that you have a little bit more opportunity to team up there. So for instance, direct mail still works well for us. So we're able to do a lot of co-ops, kind of yard sign swaps, but you can do the same thing there, for digital and social media, where if you want to run maybe a larger campaign that's going to target a bigger area, you can, put funds together with your regional franchisees or your regional locations. I am very passionate about the fact that franchisees cannot rely on just the National Advertising Fund. That should be a layer. I know you're paying into it, but the goal of the National Advertising Fund is to create this blanket of branding, test new things, use it to move your locations forward, move the corporate forward. So for franchisees saying, well, I have the National Advertising Fund, it's fine. Yeah, but they're not hyper focused on your local area. So just as you say to consumers, shop small, our local franchise is a small business. We are small business owners. You still have to market locally and treat it as such. If you rely on the National Advertising Fund, then you're really putting yourself in the bags of Starbucks and Target and Walmart, and probably not going to be able to compete with them at any sort of scale. So the local marketing is really where the bulk of it needs to be. And yeah, you can have, so you should and have support from your corporate franchisor. You know, what's great about that is that either whether you're working with an agency partner or it's internal, they're looking at a data roll up so they can make recommendations about how much you can spend. They can look at your marketing dollars from your history, and make you know, suggestions that way, so that it's not really a shot in the dark. But again, yeah, you do need to be executing on the near me searches, the local people, your community, your mom's groups, some of that grassroots stuff, basically digitally getting out there and shaking hands, your neighborhood groups. As much as we all love to hate next door, you know, that's where people are looking for you, specifically. So, you know, making sure you have that local strategy, and then being blanketed by the National Advertising Fund as a boost, is what's super important. And again, if you need more support at that local level, and or you want to try something new, you can go to your franchisor and ask for National Advertising Fund support if you want to test a product or you want to test a program, test technology. That's all out there. But again, you know, it really is a twofold, that they're working hand in hand. I had a franchise say yesterday, like, if it's not a win-win, then nobody wins. And that's really how it works with local marketing and corporate marketing.
Music to my ears as a franchisor. Thank you, Madeleine. I agree with all that.
No, it's a really great point, and I definitely agree as well. I think we do have to think of the business as that the National Ad Fund, as what it says it does, it pushes the national conversation forward. And then as a franchisee, you are local, you are the shop local partner for your community. So you do want to focus on what you can do locally in that. Natalie, because obviously this is your day in and day out, I'd love to hear what you think the challenges are when it comes to advertising a multi-location or franchise business.
Absolutely. And I would love to say, absolutely, I agree with the whole discussion about the National Ad Fund. And that's something we hear, you know, a lot of expressed trouble with, but from both the local and the corporate team. So Madeleine, you hit the nail on the head there. I think, so again, just a reminder, this is coming to you from that agency perspective. And so we work with a lot of the corporate teams, and honestly, one of the biggest pain points that we hear is scalability and having a little bit of a corporate oversight. So understanding that when we're working with a franchise brand, these corporate teams really, really want to help their teams and their local locations focus on running a business and not worry about your marketing campaigns. So in working with an agency partner, I would absolutely recommend trying to work with them and figure out how you can make a turnkey solution. So your corporate team has the trust that your agency is going to help you keep your branding unified, uniform. You're going to know exactly what types of assets, what types of campaigns, what types of messaging that your local franchisees are going to be running with their ad dollars, and also providing options, because one vendor works for one local location, that may not be the vendor of choice for another. So I think in creating that structure and working with an agency partner, I would recommend maybe rolling out a series of approved vendors and approved packages. So what I mean by that is with approved vendors. So for example, let's say you are a corporate franchise team that has 1,000 locations across the United States. For scalability reasons, for the option of choice, I would elect to do maybe 3 vendors of choice that your business has vetted, that you like the kind of creative they're able to make for your team, and the price is right. And they're able to help scale, and they're able to help just kind of provide this turnkey solution. So once you have created and found your established vendors of choice, working with them on creating packages that your local franchisees can opt into. So perhaps if their marketing budget is not through the roof in one location, but then maybe, you know, across the country, they've got money to spend, create a series of packages, perhaps packages that just kind of layer or tier on top of each other. So kind of going back to our discussion earlier on platforms of choice, when it comes to social media, of course, we love to lead with that meta piece, but let's say, Madeleine, to your point earlier, if they have a little bit more ad spend, maybe they want to add Snapchat on top of that. And of course, there's a Google, a digital search piece as well that goes into that, but it's about providing choices for your franchisees, and then also relying on a solution that is scalable and that is corporately vetted and approved, and focusing on those local efforts to get your local name out there in your community, while corporate can stay focused on using maybe those national ad dollars or additional marketing spend on emphasizing the brand. So those local efforts and those corporate efforts can really partner together.
That's a really great point. And I do think that it's the sum of the pieces equal the whole in this effort that we're putting together, because that's just the nature of the business. So all three of you have shared different perspectives, but all come down to that same fundamental piece that is the theme, from the beginning, which is testing what works, putting together the right creatives, making sure the funds are split between, the efforts that the local head office is pushing, as well as what the franchisee can push from themselves to be that hyper local piece that is the go-to. So just to kind of follow up on this question, I want to kind of dig a little deeper and see, how are things working within your team? Are you suggesting specifics, like this is what you should target on that local level, this is the ad spend you should put in, here's the creative? Or how are the franchisees localizing the content that they're choosing to put into advertising? Tori, because I know you do have that franchisor perspective, I'd love to hear how you're putting together that for your franchisees, if at all.
Yeah, we have a very robust certified agency partner program here at AKT that's part of the Exponential Fitness family. So I work with 5 certified agency partners. That means that they're following our CCPA compliance laws, that they're agreeing to certain terms and conditions when it comes to being an agency partner and representing AKT and Exponential as a whole when dealing with our franchise partners. A lot of the agencies have franchise experience or have people on their team who are also part of our franchises or another franchise, and so they really understand the business. And to me, the most important part of that is to really take what we have at the corporate level and bring it down to the local experience. So I do prescribe exactly how much we recommend they spend per month at every stage of that business, what they should be running, which platforms they should be running on, and when they should be introducing additional platforms, creative, or switching out different options. A lot of our copy and things change when there's certain events that happen at the studio. So for example, a grand opening or a 1-year anniversary really does shift the focus a little bit. And we have recommendations that we give to our agencies that then give those recommendations to the franchise partners about how to make the most of those events and how to really switch up campaigns or add additional dollars at certain key moments in the life cycle of that studio. So we keep a tight wrap on agencies in that way. And then we really use the learnings across AKT, but all Exponential brands. So, 2,500 fitness locations across the country to make the best recommendations for each individual agency and then each individual franchise partner. So to me, if I'm trying to solve a problem, let's say, the cost per lead in Denver is too high. Denver, for some reason, is always a hard market for us. And we finally feel like we've cracked the code recently. We've tried a few different agency partners. We've tried a few different account management styles. We've increased budgets and decreased budgets within a few $1,000s here and there. And finally, after months of testing and looking at what other brands have been doing within our family and working with an agency partner that was seeing the best results in Denver, we've finally been able to get our CPL below the company average and really, using local content based on what the franchisee is seeing in front of their customers day to day. So it is, again, back to that testing, to a little bit of maneuvering, a little bit of massaging what we see and put out there in the marketplace, but being able to do that from the top down and also the bottom up, hearing directly from franchisees what's working and what's not has been really an integral part of that process.
Sorry, speaking on mute because I was coughing a little bit. Sorry about that. But no, that's a great point. I think being able to see from that head office what you are supporting with and how that they can experiment on their own is a really important for those that are on the call to hear and learn what you are doing at the franchisor level. I would love to hear from you, Madeleine, what that looks like from your perspective. Like what do you see as, I guess, the best approach, just because I know you have so many unique perspectives to answer this. What do you see as most effective, whether it's the head office putting a lot of effort into giving the franchisees this or giving franchisees free reign to localize, and if that affects the results at all for you?
Yeah, definitely. I'm puppy sitting, so excuse any dog that may bark. There it is. So localization is super, super important, especially to drive engagement or more engagement. The more localized you can be, the better. There is a kind of twofold on this where the brand should have some control, the brand governance, penalty if a brand wants to, a location wants to go rogue and all of a sudden they change your colors of your logo to neon, like that's not cool. So couple suggestions on here. One, if you're a franchisor, there are agencies such as Netsertive, we do this, where you can upload your creative and then they all localize it for you with localized names, URLs, phone numbers, especially important for maybe CTV campaigns or something that's very interactive. Obviously, you want to limit the amount of clicks it takes to convert. So to have a click through that goes directly to their local page to send a lead in is very important. So there are agencies out there that can do that for you. Secondly, get yourself an editing dam, such as like a brand folder where you can go in, you can limit what they can customize, but they are in charge of going in, putting in their phone number, putting in their URL, and really putting it on the franchisee to localize. And then another thing is if you have internal creative, there's always going to be those franchisees that just can't figure it out, or they need a certain spec, or they're doing a billboard and that's not on brand folder. What we did at Made Pro is we allowed the franchisees to submit 2 custom artwork requests, I think a month, so that they could have, make sure it was customized, it was localized, but again, it was done in-house. So it wasn't this billboard that looked, for lack of better terms, like shit. So we did that, and that seemed to work pretty well. My suggestion for brand governance is keep it simple. Yes, you can have a big brand folder in-house, but your franchisees aren't going to read it. So something is simple, something like brand folder where they know that they can get approved logos and this and that and localize, the better. So I think it depends on what you're doing. Again, it can be a mix. You can use something like a buffer or an Uberall that pushes content to all of your location pages, and it doesn't have to be customized. But again, then they can have another ad or a paid ad that is localized. So again, the more localized, the better. Yes, it is a lot of effort, and it does depend on what the offer is, for sure. But I would recommend it to as much as time would allow. And again, it's kind of a multi-prong approach there. There's not one right way to do it, but it should be layered so that you're constantly being top of mind and top of mind locally for the local consumers.
Absolutely. I do think, and we've seen this, and as you've all highlighted, localization and as local as you can get really does yield the best results. So Natalie, I'm guessing that's the same hypothesis that you've come to, right? Or the same conclusion that you've come through.
Absolutely. And I think because we partner so closely with a lot of the corporate teams, I think I totally, absolutely agree with whatever we can kind of template out to make custom. So the corporate team can have the oversight on the branding, how it looks. I'm thinking specifically of one retail customer that we work with where they've got a whole calendar of events throughout the year where we will work with the corporate team to create, let's say they're going to do maybe an athletic wear type promotion. And, in January, everyone's working to get back in shape for the new year. So working with our team to produce assets that speak to that corporate planned event, make sure that the branding, the models, the clothing that's selected in these images work across the entire board, and then working with the local franchisees to be able to customize that, whether it's maybe their ad copy that's customized or the name or digital profile in which that is coming out of. And what I mean by that is, if it's Natalie's retail store in Lakeland, Florida, knowing that, the profile for my Facebook page will say Natalie's retail store in Lakeland, Florida, promoting that same type of event. So they're able to then, search, click through it to find my address, find my hours, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's important to kind of establish and work with your team on and making a consistent choice on where are we keeping our branding corporate and where are we keeping our branding localized. So for example, are the Facebook pages all going to be localized, or are we just rushing content out from the corporate Facebook page? So establishing that kind of expectation and cadence with your franchisees is also really important. And I think this is a really good time. I saw a question come in on the chat, and I hope you guys don't mind me kind of jumping ahead and bringing this up now. But one of the questions that came in directly speaks into this kind of solution of Facebook pages, for example. How do you kind of control the Facebook page landscape for your franchisees? Is everyone kind of going rogue? Do they have their own, or is it under one giant corporate structure? And I think one amazing tool that we love recommending for clients, and I'm hoping a lot of you franchise businesses are using this as well, is something called Meta's location structure. It used to be called the parent-child structure years ago, but what that allows for corporate to do is it's kind of an umbrella model. The parent brand page is just that. It's a brand page. It represents the entire brand, but it allows those child or specific location brands to kind of live underneath it, where that address is going to show up in that Facebook name. You're going to very clearly be able to see that this is Natalie's retail store in Lakeland, Florida. So you can click to my local page. That's going to have all of my local information, or at any time you can click back to that corporate page. If you want to understand the corporate brand, go to the corporate website. So again, establishing where that corporate message lives and where that local message lives. And that'll also help educate and help your team create the media strategy on what corporate is paying for and what local is paying for.
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head there in terms of one of the most frequently asked questions that we get is the question that came through in the chat about what are we setting up? How do we do it? What do you recommend? Do we keep it at the head office? What is that? So the location structure that Facebook and Meta enable innately is going to be that backbone for most of everything. So I think that's really great that you shared that here. I know we're slightly over time, but we have a little bit more to share. So we'll just dive into part 3 today, which is all about aligning your brand expectations and really essentially running effective social media campaigns, because we know this is a challenge. Social media advertising isn't going to be that walk in the park that organic posting can be. And I say that in quotes because we know social media is a bell curve in terms of the ease of use per person and per franchise and per location, because there's so many different things that affect that. So I am going to bring it right back to you, Natalie, because you're coming from us from this agency perspective. I would love to know what your recipe is for building the collaboration with your clients that benefits everyone, because you have this agency insider experience. I'm really curious to hear that.
Absolutely. It all comes down to just a few bullet points, honestly. I think transparency is huge. We as an agency want to be able to have full transparency and insights to what happens after the marketing campaigns. For example, let's talk about leads. Where are they going? How are they being nurtured? What does that mean for your sales team? Do we have the full closed loop of data to be able to adjust and move accordingly? So I would say transparency into that data. Feedback is very, very important. We were talking a little bit earlier about like the quality of leads on LinkedIn, for example. I think that understanding and having that truly established transparency is absolutely vital. I also think that setting expectations from your relationship right at the front, understanding who is responsible for what duties to make sure that there's never friction. Oh, I thought you were doing that. Well, we're doing that. I know that that's, sometimes an issue that comes up in working with an agency is maybe that scope of work didn't quite entail exactly what you thought it did. So asking those questions, having that transparency, and having that full understanding of data. Where is the true data? Do we have access to the CRM and the sales information? Are we all looking at data in the same way? Are we looking at data on the same cadence, every month versus every week? So just truly understanding and setting those expectations right off the bat, so you are all on the same page and you can all truly be on the same team and have more collaborative brainstorms, have more informed and collaborative conversations. So I think when you have those types of expectations and structures in place, that's going to allow to have productive conversations on return on investment. What assets worked best for my campaigns? What markets are working best and performing best? Tori, brought up earlier the example with Denver and that cost per lead, nobody could really figure out how to get ahead of that cost per lead. So, making sure you're looking at the same data, you're emphasizing and challenging each other with those same questions and brainstorm like pain points. So really working together based off of those shared expectations.
Absolutely. I think that's, for any partnership, whether it is a franchisor, franchisee, an agency partner, or whoever you're working with, it's that transparency, alignment on goals and expectations that sets the relationship up for success. So it's no surprise that that's been your key to success over at Curious Jane. So thank you for sharing that. Question for you, Tori and Madeleine, is, and I know Madeleine, you have a little bit of a different answer just because you are so multifaceted, is, I guess we'll start with Tori here. Are you working with any agencies right now? And what is your perspective on what it takes to have a successful agency, client, or franchisor relationship?
Yeah, I mentioned we work with 5 different certified agents. And it's a little unconventional, but we get all of our agency partners together quarterly on one webinar, just like this. And they know who each other are, they're familiar, they've met at our conferences, and they've heard each other speak, or they've heard franchisees speak about other agencies they've used. But we get everybody on one call and we go through all of our KPIs for our business across all the different vendors. We show everyone's results, everyone's KPIs, and in a competitive setting, also in an open discussion about how we are measuring success amongst different vendors. I always want to be able to have multiple agencies for franchisees to be able to bounce to. If someone's unhappy with their account management, if they want to try something new, if there's a new franchisee that's opening a location, or if they're taking over an existing location as a new franchise operator, we want people to be able to have choices. And so managing the expectation that franchisees can move between agencies is definitely something that we're open to, but I want all of those agencies to see and hear the same results. So we get everybody together quarterly, cameras on, just like this, and talk through what's working and what's not. We also, keep that pretty open line of communication about KPIs amongst agencies that way. My kind of rule of thumb with the agency relationship is I don't want to be the last to know. I don't want to be the last to know about any issue, about anybody pausing campaigns, about any escalations. I need to be the first to know. So if there's a campaign that's spiking, if there's an issue with a franchisee or an account manager, or just a concern that's being brought to the table, I need to be the first person to know, not the last to know. So that's kind of the way that I manage my relationships with each agency partner and ask them to do the same.
That's really cool.
Go ahead, Raakkel.
No, I was just gonna say that's really cool that you bring every one of your partners together on a webinar. I bet that really yields a lot of results for your team.
Yeah, and it adds a little air of competition and actualizes what we're talking about.
Absolutely savage, and I love it. Yeah, so to both what Natalie and Tori said, I've had it out with our franchisee agencies as a franchisee. I've failed many times as a franchisor setting up an agency, and now I am an agency. So I think the biggest thing to note is that your franchise is going to have different needs that different vendors can succeed at different times. It is okay to outgrow vendors. It's okay to fail, but my thing is fail fast. If you realize that a vendor is not communicating the way you want them to, it's not providing the results that you see, just cut it off as quickly as possible and move on, and being, to Tori's point, transparent and communication to everyone about that. Not every partnership is going to work, and that's okay. Having different options is where it becomes very important. And then I think the biggest thing is making sure you have not only attainable goals, but being very clear for every single dollar you spend. This is what we expect to get out of it, not just spending money to spend money and seeing who does the best, but here's our cost per lead. Can we get it lower? From our cost per lead, here's our cost per acquisition. Can we get it lower? This is the problems we're seeing. In order to solve the problem, this is what we need to see, and this is how much we're willing to spend. So making sure you're very clear of your expectations and your goals for your vendor. And then again, yes, being kind of the first to know, ensuring that they have, the brand control, but also that you trust them to talk to your franchisees. I hear a lot of franchise brands say, "Oh, well, we would never let our vendors talk to our franchisees. They're the most important thing in our franchise." I'm like, then why are you signing on that vendor? In this day and age, there are so many different vendors in every single space. So find one that works for you. And if over time it's not the best, then find someone else. I think it is a mix of internal and outsourcing, and it's okay to outsource. I also work with franchises that, want to do it internal and feel like they're not succeeding if they're not. Digital marketing or marketing in general, it is rocket science. There is a reason why I'm only in digital marketing and it pays my mortgage. Like there is SEO and website building. So, unless you have the dedicated time and resources and money to do it internally, there is no problem in outsourcing for that. Same thing with creative, same thing with, build it or buy it. There it is. There are the dogs. Give me there is going to be a difference in what you need from time to time. So making sure you keep a pulse on that. And also just being very real with yourself as a corporate franchisor or a local franchisee, understanding your pain points, understanding what's going to fix them, and working towards those goals in a kind of journey type process.
That's really well said. And, I was going to skip this question for the sake of time, but because you did bring up ROI and goals and really the tangential parts of ads, Madeleine, I did just want to throw this question your way, and we don't have to, go for everyone unless you want to share your insight here, but I'd be curious as to how are you finding it in terms of collecting and analyzing the data across the different locations, since you are both that franchisee and agency perspective here?
Yeah, so I think that the biggest thing, and it goes back to question one, is holding every single vertical of your marketing, specifically digital marketing, accountable. So instead of just saying, "Oh, here's my digital marketing, I'm going to spend $2,000 a month, and where are my leads?" This is how much I'm spending in Google. This is my cost per lead. This is how much I should expect, how many clients I should expect to get, or how many leads, I should expect to get with this spend with my cost per lead. Same thing with social media, but instead of leads, you can make it impressions or reach. This is how much I should expect to get, and monitoring it over time. If it's not reaching your expectations, then you kind of go for, is it the creative? Is it my area? Same thing with your cost per lead. Is it over because of what I'm doing, or are my budgets not realistic? So obviously, to Natalie's point, testing. So you have that data. But again, when in doubt, I always say, look for the life rafts. So there is a million different numbers out there, a million different dashboards. Really just look for the big ones, which are, your traffic, your leads, your conversions. If your traffic is low, your website's probably not great, or you don't have enough links, you're not getting enough power to send people there. If your conversion is low, your landing page probably, or your form page probably isn't built to convert. Do you have 20 forms? Is it 19 scrolls deep? Changing that. If your engagement is low on your social media, your creative probably isn't hitting the spot. So look for your life rafts, make sure they're meeting your baseline. If they're not, take it internally first, say, is it something I'm doing? And if not, then it's kind of reevaluating, well, has the landscape changed? Do I need to increase my budget or change my goals? So really breaking every single thing down so that you can hold the vertical accountable and then make the correct changes as necessary. And you're going to have to do that over time, because digital especially is changing daily. So the more you can break it out now, the easier it's going to be going forward. Because if all of a sudden they bring on a new vendor, you open a new brand, you open a new location, and you're like, well, here's my spend, go. It's going to be a lot harder. You're going to have to retest over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely. Really well said. I think there's just so much that we can say on advertising, on the ROI, on proving effectiveness, on what makes a good ad for one industry, that this conversation could honestly be a full day or a full series in itself. Each one of these topics could open up a can of worms, as we saw today, and have really spiritful debate on what's effective for me may not be effective for you, and so on. So with that, I definitely want to thank you all for joining today. Just to kind of summarize who we are and what we do, PromoRepublic is a unified local marketing platform that helps multi-location and franchise brands convert the searches in Google and in-store and in sales. And this is really why we're here, because we are a brand that works with franchisees. Your head office is in here in our digital marketing manager and managing all aspects. So it's really easy to use, all in one go. And we're really excited to have everyone on the call today, even though we're about 15 minutes over. And if you're curious and want to connect with anyone, take out your phones, scan the QR codes, because our amazing panelists are here to share their expertise with you. So again, I did want to thank you. I'll start with you, Madeleine Park, the all-in-one CMO, franchisee, agency side of things. Tori, the Chief Marketing Officer at AKT Franchise, and Natalie Miller, the Director of Digital Marketing at Curious Jane. Thank you so much. Any final words?
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed this discussion with some boss-ass ladies. And yeah, if you have any questions, I'm sure any of us have either been in your shoes or happy to answer questions. So, feel free to ping me, or I'm sure any of us on LinkedIn or directly.
Yeah,
Thanks so much for having us, you guys. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tori.
Yes, thank you, everyone. And I echo what you're saying, Madeleine. Feel free to connect. Happy to answer any questions, whatever we can do to help support you all. So thank you for listening to us and for having us. This has been a really, really nice time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I hope this was productive and you found it really insightful, as we did, even learning from each other in this short amount of time. So thank you for everything. And I'm sure we'll connect on the next CMO talk that we host. Have a nice day, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.